The desert air shimmered under the late morning sun, heat rolling across the range at Fort Resolute. Dust curled around the boots of soldiers gathered along the observation deck, their murmurs barely rising above the wind. Most of them had come to see what they already believed would happen. A logistics officer was about to fail a test meant for Tier 1 snipers. The only movement came from a lone figure standing at the far end of the range, calm and still, her uniform marked with a single silver bar on the collar. First Lieutenant Claire Ward adjusted the brim of her cap and unlatched the case resting beside her. Inside lay her rifle, a Mk13 Mod 7 standard issue for SOCOM precision marksman. She moved with measured purpose, inspecting the chamber, locking the bolt, and setting the bipod in the sand. Commander Mason Holt watched from the command post, arms folded, his face unreadable. His voice came through the loudspeaker, clearing the static. "Lieutenant Ward, you are cleared to begin the Falcon Benchmark. The timer starts on your first shot." Claire settled behind the scope, the Leupold glass cutting through the glare. 3 steel silhouettes moved along the far ridge. 600, 700, 800 meters out. She checked her wind reading from the kestrel clipped to her sleeve. 8 knots, left to right. A breath out, a finger tightening. The first crack echoed, then another, then one more. The sound of spent brass dropped softly into the sand. The valley went still. Green lights flickered across the monitors. Perfect impacts. 11.8 seconds. No one spoke. Holt lowered his binoculars and exhaled slowly. The crowd, that had come to laugh now, stood silent. The desert wind carried their disbelief away while Claire calmly cleared her weapon, her face steady as stone. The moment said everything. She did not need applause. She had earned silence. The sun had barely risen when Claire unlatched her rifle case, the metal cool against her hands. The desert was still, the air sharp and quiet, filled with the kind of silence that carried meaning. Inside the case, tucked beside her Mk13 Mod 7 rifle, was a laminated photograph. A Marine in desert fatigues smiled at the camera, the sky behind him glowing with the same soft light that touched the range now. Master Sergeant Robert Ward, her father, the man who had taught her everything about stillness and purpose. Years earlier, the world had looked different. California's coast shimmered in summer haze as a teenage Claire lay prone beside him on an old training range near Camp Pendleton. The dirt smelled like dust and salt. Her father guided her hands on a well-worn rifle, patient, steady. He told her to stop rushing the shot, to let her breath find its rhythm before pulling the trigger. Patience beats speed. Calm beats talent. She had rolled her eyes at first, but he just smiled, adjusting her elbow. Then he told her the hardest thing about shooting wasn't the trigger pull. It was trusting the silence before it. The memory blurred, replaced by the image of a folded flag. Marines stood at attention while a bugle carried its lonely note into the wind. Afghanistan, Helmand Province. A rescue mission gone wrong. Her father had covered a trapped patrol until the last helicopter lifted off. 16-year-old Claire had stood in a line of uniforms that day and made a promise no one heard. She would never let fear shake her. She would learn the stillness he lived by, the composure that turned chaos into precision. Back at Fort Resolute, that promise lived in her movements. Commander Mason Holt reviewed her record with a frown, listing what she lacked. No sniper school, no combat recon, no Tier 1 training. She met his doubt with a steady gaze. Her answer was simple, quiet, final. She just needed to know how good she really was. When the commander walked away, she began her ritual. She checked her kestrel for wind drift, adjusted elevation on her scope, and wiped the lens clean. The morning air bit against her skin, but her breathing stayed smooth, her pulse slow and even. The photo in her case caught the first light of dawn. and for a moment, the calm around her felt almost familiar. Every movement, every breath was part of a lesson that had never ended. The range at Fort Resolute stretched for miles, an ocean of tan and wind. The heat shimmered across the valley floor, carrying the faint hum of generators and the low murmur of soldiers watching from behind the blast wall. 3 steel silhouettes stood staggered across the ridgeline, 600, 700, and 800 meters out. They would move once the test began, crossing unpredictably through waves of heat and wind. The air carried a steady 8-knot crosswind, enough to push a bullet inches off target. It was a Tier 1 test known as the Falcon Benchmark. The standard was 3 hits in 12 seconds. No one had beaten it in months. Claire Ward lay prone behind her rifle, the MK-13 Mod 7 resting steady on its bipod. The stock pressed firm against her shoulder. The Leupold Mk5 HD scope glinted in the sun. Her kestrel clipped to her sleeve read wind from left to right, shifting slightly in speed. She entered corrections, turning the elevation knob until it clicked softly beneath her fingers. She checked her natural point of aim, adjusted her grip, then drew a slow breath. Her heart rate settled. The calm that always came before action washed over her like something learned long ago. Commander Mason Holt stood with binoculars, stopwatch in hand. The loudspeaker cracked through the static. Falcon scenario ready? Begin on command. A pause followed, stretching longer than it should have. The desert seemed to hold its breath. Claire's eyes stayed fixed through the scope. The world narrowed to crosshairs and wind. A voice called out from the tower. Range live. Engage. The first target slid across the lower ridge at 600 meters. She exhaled halfway, held, and squeezed. The rifle kicked. Brass spun. The sound rolled across the sand. Hit one. She cycled the bolt fast, reacquired. The second target moved diagonally at 700 meters through rising heat waves. She adjusted 2 clicks. Right. Fired. The second impact rang sharp. A puff of dust lifted. The third silhouette appeared farthest out. 800 meters, half hidden by glare. She steadied her breathing, counted her pulse, adjusted 0.5 mil high, and sent the shot. The last casing landed softly beside her glove. The timer stopped at 11.8 seconds. For a long moment, no one spoke. The sensors blinked, green, across all 3 targets. Holt lowered his binoculars slowly. The generals behind him stood frozen, disbelief mixing with silence. A soldier muttered under his breath that even Tier 1 shooters rarely went 3 for 3. Claire ejected the final casing, cleared the chamber, and sat up. The desert wind picked up again, brushing across the sand like an exhale. It felt as if the valley itself had gone quiet to listen. Holt looked toward her, speechless, while the others stared in awe. The only sound left was the wind and the soft metallic click of her bolt. In that silence, skill spoke louder than rank, and calm became its own kind of command. The range fell quiet, long after the last echo faded. The monitors shut off one by one, their glow replaced by the whisper of desert wind. Soldiers shifted in place, unsure what to say. Even Commander Holt, still holding the binoculars, hadn't moved. He finally exhaled and glanced toward the observation deck where General Adrian Keller stood. The general's expression was unreadable, but his voice cut through the silence as he ordered Claire Ward to report to the command tent. Inside, the air felt cooler, heavy with the scent of coffee and dust. Claire stepped in, her boots leaving faint prints across the floor. The officers looked up from their notes. Her uniform was wrinkled and streaked with sand, sleeves rolled, face marked by sunlight. Across from her, the polished insignia of generals caught the light. Keller leaned forward over the table, studying the data sheet that confirmed 3 perfect hits in 11.8 seconds. He asked her how she achieved it with no sniper school, no Tier 1 certification, no reconnaissance background. Commander Holt stood behind him, arms crossed, waiting for her to stumble. Claire met Keller's eyes, steady and respectful. She explained that she had learned from her father, a Marine Scout sniper instructor who had trained marksmen at Camp Pendleton. She told them she never used his name to open doors, only his lessons to stay focused. Her tone was calm, unshaken, and every word carried more weight than any qualification could. The tent grew quiet again, the kind of silence that meant understanding. The hangar doors at the SOCOM training facility in Nevada stood open as the sun climbed over the desert horizon. Inside, the air smelled of oil and metal, the hum of generators mixing with the sound of boots on concrete. Claire Ward stepped through the doorway, her duffel slung over one shoulder, eyes taking in the room of operators who turned to look. Unit 9 wasn't a regular team. It was a joint evaluation detachment made up of Navy SEALs, Army Special Forces, and AFSOCOM Airmen. These were the soldiers who trained the best of the best, and they didn't hide their skepticism when a logistics officer walked into their space. Lieutenant Commander Cole Mercer, tall and composed, called the room to attention. He introduced Claire as a new attachment, then added that she was the one who had broken the Falcon Benchmark record. The silence that followed felt more like disbelief than admiration. Chief Ethan Rourke leaned against a crate, arms crossed, his smirk carrying the kind of confidence only a seasoned operator could own. Petty officers. Diaz and McConnell exchanged looks, one curious, the other unsure. Mercer dismissed the group with a reminder: gear inspection at 0600. No exceptions. The next morning began before dawn. The desert air was cold enough to sting. Claire stood in line with the others, her rifle case open, hands moving through a checklist of motions she knew by heart. She cleared her Mk13 Mod 7, loaded a 7.62 by 51 mm magazine, checked the bolt, and verified the Leupold optic alignment. Around her, the team moved with effortless precision, each man completing his tasks through muscle memory. She didn't try to match their pace. She simply worked cleanly, quietly, efficiently. When Mercer stopped beside her to inspect her gear, he found everything in perfect order and moved on without a word. The physical training hit harder. Urban entry drills, breaching, fast rope descents, and reaction to contact scenarios pushed her to exhaustion. The operators moved like a single machine while she lagged a step behind, learning the rhythm through observation rather than complaint. She studied every detail: the hand signals, the timing between commands, the exact second each man reloaded. She adapted faster than anyone expected. By the third day, the smirks faded. During a live-fire moving target exercise, the team rotated through Overwatch positions. Claire's turn came last. She lay prone, adjusted her scope, and hit every target in sequence before the spotter could call range corrections. McConnell lowered his binoculars and said quietly to Diaz that she shot between heartbeats. The name stuck. Ghost Eye. It spread through the team like a quiet admission. By the end of the week, no one questioned why she was there. Rourke stopped testing her and started watching her. Mercer no longer evaluated. He trusted her calls. The tension in the hangar gave way to silent respect. Late that night, Claire sat alone on the range under the floodlights, cleaning her rifle with methodical care. McConnell and Diaz passed by on their way out, their voices low. She doesn't stop until the wind does. The words drifted across the sand, carrying the truth that needed no ceremony. In the world of Unit 9, she had earned her place. The night was black and silent over the Nevada desert, the kind of darkness that swallowed movement and sound. The SOCOM training range had been transformed into a live simulation zone, complete with mock compounds, hidden lights, and infrared strobes marking friendly zones. Helicopters circled low, their rotors churning dust into spirals that vanished into the wind. Unit 9 stood ready at the insertion point, each operator double-checking their gear under the faint glow of chem lights. Claire Ward climbed the northern ridge alone, carrying her Mk-13 Mod 7 rifle chambered in .300 Winchester Magnum. The rifle's matte finish blended with the terrain. Her Leupold Mk5 HD scope caught a faint reflection from the stars. Night vision lenses flickered to life in her AN-PVS 31 goggles, painting the valley in pale green light. Her overwatch position was half a mile from the objective compound. She unfolded the bipod, stabilized her rifle on the rock, and synced her headset with the team's comms net. Mercer's voice came through, calm and clipped. Team moving to phase line Alpha. Claire adjusted her rangefinder and checked her ballistic computer. 6 heat signatures moved within the compound. 2 smaller figures huddled inside. Likely role players for non-combatants. She called it in. Tone steady. Confirming targets and their positions. 2 on balcony. 1 on roof. 3 at ground level near the vehicles. Mercer acknowledged. Copy. Stand by for breach. The desert was still until the first flash charge went off, lighting the valley like lightning. The thump of rotor wash followed, sand whipping across her scope. Through the haze, she tracked movement on the upper balcony. 1 breath, half exhale, trigger squeeze. The round found its mark. Another silhouette appeared behind the first. She shifted, adjusted, 2 clicks, left, and fired again. The compound's outer perimeter cleared as the team entered through the breach point. Over comms. Mercer's voice cut through the static. Overwatch solid. Keep eyes north. For a few seconds, everything ran smooth. Then new movement appeared on her scope. 6 armed hostiles advancing from the northern slope, straight toward her position. They weren't part of the exercise. They moved with precision, using natural cover, advancing fast. Claire reported contact. Command ordered her to displace and fall back to secondary. She glanced through the scope again. The assault team was still in the open. If she moved, they'd lose Overwatch. Negative, she said quietly. Engaging. Her pulse slowed to the rhythm of her breath. She adjusted for crosswind, waited for the first muzzle flash, and fired. 1 down. 2. The third dropped as she cycled the bolt and shifted to a new angle. Rounds snapped past her as she crawled backward down the slope, staying low. Dirt sprayed near her shoulder, but she didn't rush. Bounding movement, low silhouette, rifle close to the body. She found new cover. Prone again, scope up, adjusting 0 by instinct. Her voice stayed calm over the net. 3 down, 3 remaining, closing at 100 meters. Mercer's reply was sharp but strained. Hold your position. Ghost Eye. We're pulling back. She took 1 more shot, then another, her last round catching a shadow mid-sprint. Silence returned, broken only by the soft hiss of wind. When the team reached the landing zone, the MH-60 waited, rotors biting through the dark. Claire sprinted the last 100 yards under fading fire, rifle clutched tight, boots pounding across open ground. Mercer met her at the ramp, his face half lit by the red cabin lights. That was reckless, he said, but his tone carried something close to admiration. She caught her breath and answered simply. The team was still in the open. As the helicopter lifted off, the compound below shrank into a blur of light and smoke. Inside the aircraft, no one spoke. The rhythm of the rotors filled the silence. Mercer glanced her way one last time, then looked forward. Claire adjusted her headset, eyes calm behind her NVGs. Outside, the desert stretched endlessly, still and dark. The voiceover closed the moment in her mind. Composure under fire isn't about fear or courage. It's about silence, the kind that steadies your hands when the world falls apart. The debrief room smelled of dust, sweat, and gun oil, Folding tables filled the space, maps still spread open from the operation. The men of Unit 9 sat scattered across the room, faces drawn, but alert. The projector hummed softly as grainy footage of the night exercise replayed on the far wall. Every burst of light, every measured call-out, every clean shot appeared again in slow motion. Claire Ward sat near the back, silent, her uniform streaked with dirt, her hands folded on the table. Lieutenant Commander Cole Mercer stood at the front beside General Adrian Keller, his voice steady as he summarized the results. 9 confirmed hostiles. 0 friendly casualties. Full extraction under live fire. He didn't add more. He didn't have to. The room carried the weight of what those words meant. The general nodded once, eyes sharp, scanning the faces in the room before settling on Chief Ethan Rourke. Assessment. Chief. Rourke leaned forward, elbows on his knees. The man who had doubted her the most now spoke the quietest. She ignored fear, not orders. He said, "She stayed when any of us would have pulled back. That saved the mission." Diaz shifted in his chair, then added that her Overwatch callouts had kept the team alive when visibility dropped. McConnell nodded in agreement, his tone half weary, half proud. She saw everything before we did. The words came easy, spoken, the way soldiers talk when truth doesn't need ceremony. General Keller turned toward Claire. "Lieutenant Ward, you've demonstrated Tier 1 readiness, effective immediately. You are appointed Sniper Commander, Special Operations Unit 9. Claire rose, back straight, boots firm against the floor. She saluted sharply. "Yes, sir." Her voice was calm, her face unreadable. Keller stepped forward, lowering his own hand to shake hers. The gesture wasn't formality. It was respect. The others didn't clap or cheer. They didn't need to. The silence carried more weight than sound. Rourke nodded once. A faint acknowledgement between equals. Mercer met her eyes briefly, and there was a trace of pride behind his calm expression. As the room emptied, the projector light flickered across the wall, the faint hum fading with it. The moment didn't feel like victory. It felt like balance, recognition without celebration. In the military, respect isn't handed out in speeches or medals. It's earned in silence, in the space between orders and actions. And that silence now belonged to her. The hangar was almost empty when the debrief ended. The overhead lights buzzed softly, casting long shadows over the tables and gear still scattered across the floor. Outside, the night air hummed with the distant sound of generators, the kind of low rhythm that always filled military bases after hours. Claire Ward stood near the open doorway, her MK-13 Mod 7 rifle cleaned, oiled, and packed neatly in its case. The echo of the day lingered in the stillness, a silence that carried both exhaustion and pride. Commander Mason Holt stepped through the doorway, his uniform sleeves rolled up, his boots coated in desert dust. He paused for a moment, watching her. "I came to see if the stories were true," he said finally, his tone lighter than she had ever heard it. Claire smiled faintly, a calm expression settling across her face. "The real test isn't about how steady your aim is," she said quietly. "It's about staying silent when everything else breaks." Holt nodded once. No argument in his eyes, just understanding. Then he turned and walked out into the darkness, leaving her alone with the hum of the night. Claire stepped outside a few minutes later. The desert stretched before her, the same landscape where it all began. The wind moved gently across the sand, cool and constant, carrying the faint scent of dust and sage. She looked toward the ridgeline where she had once stood alone under the morning sun. The stars shimmered faintly above, and for a moment, the world seemed to hold its breath. Her voice was barely a whisper, still quiet. Dad. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of memory, purpose, and peace. Some heroes never raise their voices or seek attention. They don't chase recognition. They let their actions speak for them. Claire Ward was one of them. Calm, under fire, steady, under pressure. Proof that real strength doesn't shout. It simply endures.